Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The warm glow of fairy lights danced across Emma's face as she giggled, her tiny hands tearing at the bright paper wrapped around her presents. Jake Miller's chest swelled with a father's pride. 7 years old today, his little girl, his entire world. But even as he smiled, something in the air felt wrong. Like a storm cloud gathering on a summer day, silent but electric. Blow out the candles, baby. Laura's voice rang out, syrupy sweet. She leaned close to Emma, her arm around the birthday girl, but her eyes flicked past Jake to the stranger at the back of the yard. A man in a leather jacket, leaning against the fence, eyes dark as midnight. His lips curled in a half-smirk when he caught Jake's stare. Jake's hand twitched. That man shouldn't be here. He didn't recognize him. He forced a smile as Emma's breath scattered the flickering candles into smoke. But inside, his mind was already racing, clockwork gears turning in the dark. As the guests laughed and music played, Jake watched Laura lean in close to the man, too close. Her laugh, soft and false. The man's hand brushing her arm for just a second too long. Emma's laughter bubbled like a fragile bubble, and Jake's heart cracked. He shifted his gaze to Emma, her face shining with innocent wonder. His mission had always been clear: protect her at any cost. But tonight, he saw that even the home he built might be crumbling. Jake's pulse thudded in his ears, the noise of the party fading around him. Laura's smile, the stranger's gaze, Emma's trusting eyes, he drank them all in, a soldier's mind filing them away. This was no ordinary homecoming. This was a battlefield, and he would fight for her. Cue. The music fades, the camera lingers on Jake's clenched jaw, the smirk on the stranger's face. The party rages on, but something dark has already begun. Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. The guests left slowly, carrying laughter and cake crumbs with them. Emma, exhausted from excitement, fell asleep curled on the couch. Jake carried her up to bed, every step feeling heavier than the last. When he returned, Laura was already in the kitchen, her back turned, hands gripping the counter like she might collapse. Jake took a deep breath. "Who was that guy?" he asked, voice low, steady. Laura didn't turn. "Just a friend from work." Tom. Jake echoed, testing the name on his tongue like poison. Didn't know he was invited. She turned then, her smile brittle. "He just stopped by? I didn't think you'd mind." Jake's eyes narrowed. "I mind." The silence thickened. Laura looked away, biting her lip, the picture of innocence. But Jake wasn't fooled. Not after 3 tours overseas. He knew the look of someone lying to save their skin. The kitchen clock ticked, loud as a drumbeat. Jake's mind whirred, every detail, every slip. Why'd he come alone? Why'd he stay in the shadows all night? He pressed. Laura's eyes flashed. "Are you accusing me of something?" she snapped. "I'm asking," Jake replied evenly. "Because I saw how he looked at you. And I saw how you looked back." Her shoulders stiffened, chin jutting forward. "You're imagining things. It's been a long day. Let it go." But Jake couldn't let it go. His gut twisted, soldier's instincts screaming louder than his pounding heart. He looked down the hallway where Emma slept, her small hand clutching her stuffed bear. A father's vow thrummed in his veins. Protect her. Always. As Laura retreated upstairs, Jake stood alone in the kitchen. The fridge hummed. The lights flickered. And in the silence, he swore he could still hear Tom's low laugh, echoing in the darkness. Sleep never came. Jake lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling as the hours crept by. The glow of streetlights spilled through the window, painting long shadows across the room. In the dead of night, every creak of the house became a threat. Every memory of Laura's laughter with that man scraped at his chest like a blade. He rose before dawn, muscles tense with restless energy. He slipped outside into the cold morning air, the mist swirling around him. The night's images wouldn't leave him. Laura's soft smile, the stranger's calculating stare. By the time the sun rose, he'd made a decision. A soldier's instinct never lied. And if Laura wouldn't tell him the truth, he'd find it himself. He waited until she left for her shift at the diner. Early meeting, she'd said, avoiding his eyes. He watched her car vanish down the street, her lies trailing in her wake. Inside, he searched the house. It was his home, but suddenly every room felt foreign. In the closet, a hidden perfume bottle he didn't recognize. On the bathroom sink, a hairbrush with strands of dark hair that weren't Laura's or Emma's. His heart hammered. He moved to her car in the driveway, opening the glove compartment. Receipts, papers, nothing at first. But then, tucked under the seat, a folded piece of paper. A hotel receipt. 2 nights, paid in cash. The date, last week. Jake closed his eyes, breathing hard. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was fact. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel, the cold metal grounding him. "You did this," he whispered to the empty car. "You brought this into our home." He didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went, but he'd find out. Because he wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a father. And no one, not even the woman he loved, would take that from him. Jake couldn't sit still. The truth burned in his chest like a live grenade, ready to explode. He spent the morning moving through the house like a silent shadow, every muscle coiled tight. The house that once felt warm now reeked of secrets he could almost taste in the air. He lingered by the window, watching Emma chase Bubbles in the backyard. Her laughter was a melody, light and bright, and it cut through the storm brewing inside him. She was innocent in all of this, a piece of light in the growing darkness. He wouldn't let that light be stolen. Laura's car pulled up later that afternoon, and Jake watched her step out with practiced calm. Her face was composed, smile carefully arranged. But he saw it, the twitch of her fingers, the tightness around her eyes. She stepped inside, keys jingling in her hand. "Hey, babe," she said lightly, but her voice trembled just enough to catch his ear. Jake's jaw tightened. "How was work?" Laura blinked. "Fine. Busy, you know how it is." "Yeah," he murmured, eyes locked on her. "I know how it is." She hesitated, sensing the shift in the air. "You're in a mood," she said, trying to smile, but he wasn't buying it. "I'm in a mood because there's a man in my house who shouldn't be here," Jake said evenly, his voice low. "A man who looks at my daughter like she's his to take." Laura's eyes widened, her breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "Tom's just a friend." Jake stepped closer, the soldier's steel in his spine. "I've seen the messages. The hotel receipt. Don't insult me with lies, Laura." For a moment, her mouth worked soundlessly. Then she swallowed hard, her eyes darting away. "Jake, please. It's complicated." He laughed, a bitter sound. "No, it's not. You invited the enemy into our home. And now, I have to protect Emma from the fallout." Laura reached out, her fingers trembling, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't pretend to be the victim now." The silence between them was a chasm. Outside, Emma's laughter echoed like a promise. He'd fight for her, no matter what. That night, the house was a tomb of whispers and unsaid words. Emma slept in her room, the soft glow of her nightlight casting comforting shadows across her walls. But in the master bedroom, there was no comfort left. Jake lay awake, the sheets twisted around him like chains. He could hear Laura in the bathroom, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice a hushed murmur. "I can't talk long," she said, her tone urgent, pleading. "He knows something. He's watching me." Jake closed his eyes, the words searing into his mind like bullets. He heard the man's voice, low and possessive. "Don't let him find out about us. You promised." She promised. Those words twisted his gut. He pushed himself out of bed, the floor cold beneath his feet as he padded down the hall, careful not to wake Emma. He stood outside the bathroom door, listening to Laura's laughter, a sound that once made his heart swell, now curdled with betrayal. She emerged from the bathroom, phone tucked into her pocket, startled to see him there. Jake, she gasped. What are you doing up? He stared at her, his voice calm but razor sharp. Who was that? Nobody, she lied, too quickly. Just a friend. Tom, he pressed, stepping closer, his face inches from hers. She flinched. Why are you doing this? You're scaring me. He barked a harsh laugh. I'm scaring you? After what you've done. Laura's eyes welled with tears, but he saw through them. You're imagining things, Jake, she whispered. You're losing it. He leaned in, his breath cold on her cheek. I'm not losing anything. But you're about to lose everything if you keep lying to me. She turned away, shoulders shaking. But he didn't miss the defiance in her eyes. She was already planning her next move, and he knew it. Jake retreated to the couch, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, the weight of her secrets pressing in around her. He lay there, listening to the silence between them, and he swore he could still hear the echo of her laughter, soft and twisted, mocking the love they'd once shared. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill in Jake's bones. He rose early, mind already racing, replaying every lie and every stolen glance he'd witnessed. Laura's betrayal had cracked something in him, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He went to Emma's room first, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead as she slept. Her soft breathing was a balm to his bruised soul. He pressed a kiss to her temple, silently vowing, no matter what happens, I'll keep you safe. Downstairs, the air was thick with tension. Laura sat at the table, pretending to read a magazine. She didn't look up as he entered. Morning, she said, too bright, too forced. Morning, Jake replied, his voice flat. He moved around the kitchen with practiced precision, making Emma's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes, the smell of them filling the air. Laura watched him, eyes darting nervously every time he turned his back. As he reached for the plate, something caught his eye, a small, wrapped box pushed behind the fruit bowl. It was red, tied with a silver ribbon, the kind of gift meant for something intimate. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. What's this? He asked, holding it out to her. Laura's face paled. It's nothing. Nothing? He echoed, lifting a brow. Looks like something. It's just a gift. From Tom, she admitted, her voice trembling. He said it was for Emma. Jake's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck corded with fury. For Emma, he hissed. You let that man buy things for our daughter? He was just being kind, she stammered. It's harmless, Jake. Nothing about this is harmless, he snapped, his voice low and deadly. He set the box down carefully, his eyes locked on hers. If he thinks he can worm his way into my daughter's life, he's got another thing coming. Laura's lips parted in a silent protest, but he turned away, unwilling to hear another lie. The unopened gift sat on the table like a ticking bomb, a symbol of everything that was tearing them apart. Jake's mind was made up. He would find out just how deep this betrayal ran, and he would end it, once and for all. The sun rose higher, spilling light over the table that now felt more like a battlefield than a home. Emma sat between her parents, legs swinging under the chair, oblivious to the war of glances crackling above her head. Jake moved slowly, his fork scraping against the plate. Laura's eyes flicked to him, then quickly away. She reached for the coffee pot with a trembling hand. More? She offered, her voice a fragile thread. No. Thanks, Jake said, his tone steady but ice-cold. Every word he spoke was measured, deliberate. He didn't trust his voice not to break open with the fury coiled in his chest. Emma's voice cut through the tension. Daddy, can we go to the park later? She chirped, hopeful. Jake managed a small smile for her, though it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, princess, he said softly. We'll have a whole day, just you and me. Laura flinched at that, her face paling. I thought we'd all go together, she said quickly. Jake's eyes snapped to hers, cold and unyielding. No, you've got your own plans, don't you? The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. Laura swallowed hard, her lips parting, but no excuses came. She just stared at him, eyes brimming with something. Fear, guilt, or maybe just the weight of her own lies. Emma chewed her pancake happily, oblivious. But Jake's gaze stayed locked on Laura, every second stretching longer, deeper. He watched her flinch with every scrape of his fork against the plate, every breath he took. Finally, Laura stood abruptly. "I have to get to work," she mumbled, grabbing her purse. She leaned down to kiss Emma's head, Emma's smile bright as ever. But when she straightened and met Jake's eyes, her lips pressed together in a tight line. No kiss for him. No parting words. As the door clicked shut behind her, Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked at Emma, her innocent smile, and felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. "You're safe with me," he whispered to her, more a vow to himself than to her. He'd keep that promise if it was the last thing he did. After Laura left, Jake felt the house settle around him like a tomb. He cleaned up the plates, his movements mechanical, each clang of dish against sink echoing louder in the silence. He kept his face calm for Emma, but inside, his mind was a storm. He packed a small bag, Emma's favorite snacks, a change of clothes, and bundled her into the car. "Daddy-daughter day," he told her, managing a smile that felt more like a grimace. She beamed back at him, swinging her feet in the back seat. The park was quiet when they arrived, the early hour keeping other families away. Emma raced to the swings, her laughter ringing out clear and pure. Jake pushed her gently, his eyes scanning the empty paths, every shadow a possible threat. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Max. "Need to talk. Call me ASAP." He lifted Emma off the swing, setting her down on the grass. "Stay where I can see you, okay, princess?" She nodded, her curls bouncing. He stepped away, dialing. Max picked up immediately, his voice low and urgent. "Jake, I did some digging. Tom's not just some coworker. He's been using a fake name. Real name's Tom Garrison, registered sex offender, 2 states away. He's dangerous, Jake." Jake's grip tightened on the phone. "Tell me everything," he ordered, his voice calm but laced with steel. "He's got a record for child endangerment, domestic abuse. Laura's either clueless or covering for him. I don't know which is worse." Jake's blood ran cold. He looked over at Emma, her laughter cutting through the sudden roar of blood in his ears. "I won't let him near her," Jake said, voice deadly calm. "Not ever again." "You need to be careful," Max warned. "People like him. They're like snakes. They'll twist it all back on you if they can." Jake nodded slowly, his jaw set. "Let him try," he said quietly. "I'm done playing defense." He ended the call, slipping the phone back in his pocket. Emma ran up, breathless, her cheeks flushed pink. "Daddy, look how high I can jump." He forced a smile, scooping her up in his arms. "You're my brave girl," he whispered against her hair, his heart a war drum. "And I'm your shield. Always." The drive home was silent except for Emma's soft singing in the back seat. Jake kept his eyes on the road, every mile ticking by with grim purpose. His mind was a locked vault, but inside it was a single, searing thought. He would end this, no matter what. Back at the house, he carried Emma upstairs for a nap, her head heavy on his shoulder. She was his anchor, his reason to fight. As he tucked her in, she murmured sleepily, "Love you, Daddy." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Love you more than anything, princess." Downstairs, he went to the closet and pulled out the old footlocker from his army days. It was battered and dented, but it held more than just gear. It held memories of the man he used to be. He opened it carefully, the smell of gun oil and canvas rising up to meet him. He ran his fingers over the dog tags, the old photographs of brothers in arms. Then he reached for the small, black notebook he'd kept through every deployment, a log of tactics, of survival. You adapt. You overcome. You protect. He flipped it open, his pen moving fast. Names. Numbers. A plan taking shape, cold and methodical. Tom's real identity. Laura's lies. Proof. Leverage. The steps he'd need to take to expose them all. No more doubts. No more half measures. When he was done, he sat back, staring at the list. His hands were steady. His heart was calm. The soldier in him had taken over, and there was no force on earth that could stop him now. He heard a creak in the hallway. Laura's voice, soft and hesitant. "Jake, can we talk?" He didn't look up. Not now. She shifted in the doorway, her face pale, lips pressed together. "Please." I want to explain. He met her eyes finally, cold and unflinching. Save it. I'm done listening to lies. She flinched like he'd slapped her. For a moment, her eyes burned with something. Anger, or maybe fear. She turned away without another word. Jake sat there, alone with his notes, his breathing slow and even. The lines were drawn, the plan set in motion. No one would take Emma from him. Not Tom. Not Laura. No one. The afternoon stretched on in a suffocating silence. Jake moved through the house with quiet purpose, every sound sharpened by the storm inside him. The ticking of the old clock, the creak of the floorboards beneath his boots, each beat echoed with the truth he was piecing together. He couldn't stop thinking about what Max had told him. Tom Garrison, a predator who had wormed his way into their lives. Laura's voice replayed in his mind, the way she'd said, "It's harmless," her smile brittle and false. It wasn't harmless. It was war. He slipped into the bedroom, Laura's perfume still lingering in the air. The scent turned his stomach. He went to her nightstand, pulling open drawers, searching for anything, any piece of the puzzle she was trying to hide. In the bottom drawer, he found a small velvet box. Inside was a bracelet, gold, delicate, expensive. Not the kind of thing Laura would buy for herself. His jaw clenched as he turned it over, reading the tiny engraving on the inside. "For the girl who stole my heart." Tom's words, etched in metal. Jake closed his fist around it, his knuckles whitening. He heard the door open downstairs. Laura's footsteps, careful and measured. He didn't move. He waited, silent as a ghost. She entered the bedroom, eyes widening when she saw him standing there, the bracelet dangling from his fingers. "Jake," she breathed, her face going pale. "Who is he to you?" "Laura," he asked quietly, the calm before the storm. It's not what you think," she stammered, but he cut her off with a look. "Don't lie to me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. He said things. Made me feel alive again. Jake's lips twisted in a bitter smile. "Alive? While you let a predator into our home? While you let him near our daughter?" His voice was soft, deadly. Laura shook her head, trembling. "I didn't know you knew enough," he snapped, his voice cold steel. "You let him in, Laura. You let him into our lives." He dropped the bracelet on the bed between them, the finality of the gesture ringing louder than any words. She flinched like it was a gunshot. Jake turned and walked out, leaving her there, her tears falling silently in the ruined light of their room. The night fell heavy, pressing against the windows like a living thing. Jake sat alone in the living room, the soft hum of the baby monitor from Emma's room the only sound he trusted. The darkness around him was thick, but his mind was sharper than ever. Laura had retreated upstairs, the door to the bedroom closed like a prison cell. Jake didn't care. Let her sit in her shame. Let her feel the weight of what she'd done. His phone buzzed on the table, Max again. "I've got more," he said without preamble, his voice low and urgent. "Tom's been bouncing around for years. He's changed his name more times than I can count. He's a ghost, Jake, but I've got him pinned now. You're not crazy." "I know I'm not," Jake said quietly, staring into the darkness. "I just needed someone else to see it too." "You're not alone in this," Max said. "I'm with you. We'll make sure he never hurts Emma, or anyone else, again." Jake closed his eyes, the words sinking in like balm on an open wound. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope. Not for Laura, she was beyond saving, but for Emma, for the life he would build for her without these shadows. He stood, moving to the window. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, the world quiet and watchful. His reflection stared back at him, haggard, hollow-eyed, but resolute. The soldier in him had been reawakened, the man who had survived deserts and jungles, who knew how to fight and win. His hand closed around the window frame, knuckles whitening. "You're safe, baby girl," he whispered into the night. "I swear it." Upstairs, he heard a muffled sob, Laura, alone with her choices. He didn't care. His focus was clear. The battle lines were drawn, and he would fight, not for her, but for the only person who mattered. He turned from the window, his mind already moving to the next step. No more waiting. No more second chances. Tomorrow, The real war would begin. The morning dawned cold and clear, the sun bright but offering no warmth. Jake dressed Emma in her favorite yellow sweater, the one that made her eyes sparkle like the sky after rain. She beamed up at him, a small anchor in the storm. "Daddy, can we have pancakes again?" she asked, her voice light, full of the innocence he was fighting to protect. "Of course, princess," he said softly, brushing a kiss to her forehead. "Anything you want." Downstairs, the house felt quiet, too quiet. Laura sat at the table, her eyes red, fingers curled around a cold cup of coffee. She didn't speak. Jake didn't either. There was nothing left to say. He focused on Emma. Every smile she gave him another layer of armor against the darkness. She chattered about school, about the swings at the park, her bright voice filling the air that Laura's silence threatened to choke. Jake's mind never stopped moving. As he poured syrup over Emma's pancakes, he ran through the steps in his head, Max's findings, the proof he needed to bury Tom and expose Laura. Every move was calculated, a soldier's precision honed by years of discipline. Laura finally looked up, her voice a whisper. "Jake, I'm sorry." He met her gaze, his eyes hard. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Laura." Tears welled in her eyes, but he turned away. Emma giggled at a silly face he made, and that was all that mattered. He wouldn't let Laura's lies touch Emma's joy. After breakfast, he took Emma's small hand in his, their fingers laced tight. "We're going on an adventure today," he told her, and she squealed with delight. Laura's lips parted, as if to argue, but she said nothing. Her shoulders sagged. She knew she'd lost the right to claim any piece of Emma's laughter. Jake lifted Emma into the truck, her giggles like music. He turned back to Laura one last time. "I'll keep her safe," he said, his voice low and final. "No matter what." Laura swallowed hard, her face pale, and he sighed, the moment she realized she had already lost. And in that silence, he found his resolve. Emma's laughter was the only sound he needed to hear, and he would make damn sure it was never silenced again. Jake returned home with Emma asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. The peaceful rise and fall of her breath was a stark contrast to the fury coiling in his veins. He carried her up to her room, tucking her in gently, his fingers lingering on her cheek. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" she murmured. "Sleep, princess," he whispered, smoothing her hair. "I'm right here." Downstairs, Laura was waiting. She stood in the living room, wringing her hands, her face pale. The sun cast long shadows across the floor, slicing the room into shards of light and darkness. "Jake," she started, her voice breaking. "We need to talk." He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, his face unreadable, every inch the soldier she'd once loved and now feared. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Please." "I didn't know. About Tom, about what he really was." He laughed, a hollow sound that cut the air between them. "You didn't know? You brought him here, Laura, into our lives, into Emma's life." She flinched at Emma's name. "I thought," he said, "he'd help, that he'd take care of us. I was lonely, Jake. You were always gone." He stepped closer, his eyes dark. "Don't you dare blame this on me. I was fighting a war overseas. You were fighting one in our bed." Her shoulders shook, sobs tearing through her. "I didn't know how to stop. He said things that made me feel alive. I didn't see the danger until it was too late." Jake finished, his voice low and cold. "And now? Now you're going to tell me everything, Laura. Every detail. Because if there's one thing I can't stand, it's not knowing what threat I'm dealing with." She nodded, her face crumpling. "I'll tell you everything," she whispered. "I swear. Just don't hate me." Jake's jaw tightened. "I don't have the luxury of hating you right now. I only have the luxury of protecting Emma." In that moment, the last illusion of their marriage shattered, and Jake, for the first time, truly saw the woman who had once shared his bed, a stranger he would never trust again. Laura's confession poured out in jagged gasps, each word another crack in the fragile shell of their family. She spoke of secret meetings, of hotel rooms she'd slipped away to while Emma slept safe at home, of Tom's promises, sweet lies that painted the world in false colors. I thought he loved me," she sobbed, her voice raw. I thought he would give me everything I was missing. Jake stood silent, his arms crossed, every word she spoke searing into his mind. The living room felt colder with every revelation, the air around them turning to ice. "And Emma?" he demanded, his voice ablade. "Did you know he was watching her? Did you know what he was capable of?" She shook her head violently. "No, never. I swear. Jake, I would never let anyone hurt her. I didn't know he had that past." His lips pressed into a thin line. "You didn't know because you didn't want to. You were too busy thinking about what you wanted, not what was right." Her shoulders slumped, her sobs quieter now. "What do we do?" she whispered. "What happens now?" Jake took a deep breath, his mind working like the soldier he'd once been. Now I take back control. I've got enough on him to bury him for life. And you? You're going to cooperate. You're going to help me get him out of our lives for good." She nodded slowly, her face streaked with tears. "I'll do whatever you say." He stared at her, seeing nothing of the woman he'd married. "You'd better," he said softly. "Because if I find out you're still hiding anything, I'll make sure you never see Emma again." The words hung heavy between them, final and absolute. Laura bowed her head, a broken shell of the woman he once loved. Upstairs, Emma slept on, untouched by the darkness swirling below. Jake looked up the stairs, his resolve hardening. No matter what else crumbled, he would keep her safe, even if he had to burn every lie to the ground. The next morning, Jake woke before dawn, the weight of his decision pressing on his chest like body armor. He moved through the house in silence, every step calculated, every sound cataloged like a soldier sweeping enemy ground. He poured black coffee into his thermos, the bitterness matching the iron resolve in his gut. Emma's laughter was the only thing that cut through the fog. She padded sleepily into the kitchen, her eyes bright. "Morning, Daddy," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Morning, Princess," he said softly, ruffling her hair. "Go play in the living room, okay? I'll be right there." She nodded, her small feet padding away. Jake watched her go, then turned to the task at hand. He pulled out his old surveillance kit, a relic from his military days he'd hoped he'd never need again. Small cameras, audio bugs, and a laptop that had seen more battlefields than most men ever would. He worked quickly, methodically. A camera above the front door, another in the living room, and a third hidden in the hallway, each one a silent sentinel. He placed a small mic in the kitchen light fixture, the wires tucked carefully away. Every angle covered, every secret soon to be exposed. Laura watched him from the doorway, her eyes wide. "Jake, is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice small. He didn't look at her. "It's more than necessary," he said coldly. "It's the only way I can be sure you're not still lying to me." She flinched but said nothing more. She'd lost the right to question his actions the moment she brought Tom into their lives. When he was done, he turned to her, his face set. "I'm going to work with Max. We'll have everything we need soon. And you're going to keep your mouth shut, Laura. No more secrets. No more lies." She nodded numbly, her shoulders hunched. Jake watched her for a moment, then turned away, his mind already working. The cameras would catch everything. Every word, every look. No more shadows. No more surprises. He took a final sip of coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. Upstairs, Emma's laughter rang out, pure and sweet. And in that sound, he found his purpose. No matter how deep the betrayal ran, he would tear it out by the roots. Jake sat at the dining table, the glow of the laptop screen the only light in the room. His eyes were locked on the feed from the cameras he'd installed. Every flicker of movement burned into his memory. Laura's voice drifted from the kitchen, soft and strained as she hummed to herself, trying to play the role of a doting wife, but he saw right through it. He rewound the footage, studying every detail. Tom's name kept coming up in the messages Laura thought she'd deleted. He watched her pacing the kitchen, her fingers drumming nervously on the counter as she typed out another text. "I can't keep doing this. He's suspicious. Please, just be careful." Jake's jaw tightened. The words were poison in his veins. Tom wasn't just a lover. He was a puppet master, pulling Laura's strings, wrapping her so tight in his web that she couldn't see the noose around her neck. He scrolled through the messages, each one a nail in Tom's coffin. "I need to see you," Tom wrote. "We have to finish what we started." Jake's pulse drummed in his ears. Finish what we started? Over my dead body, he thought. Laura's footsteps came closer. She stopped in the doorway, arms crossed. "Jake, you're scaring me," she said softly, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Fear, yes, but something else too. Guilt. She knew he was on to her. "You should be scared," he said without looking up. "Because you let him into our lives. You let him near Emma." She swallowed hard, her face paling. "I never meant." "It doesn't matter what you meant," he cut in, his voice low and cold. "What matters is what he's done, and what I'm going to do about it." For a moment, she just stood there, her breath shaky. Then she turned and fled upstairs, her footsteps echoing in the silent house. Jake watched her go, his eyes hard. "Run, Laura," he thought. But there's nowhere left to hide. He turned back to the laptop, his mind a steel trap, every plan falling into place like the final pieces of a war map. Later that night, as the house settled into a tense, uneasy quiet, Jake lay awake on the couch. The pale light of the moon cut through the window, washing everything in a cold glow. His mind wouldn't rest. Every beat of his heart drummed with purpose. He rose silently, moving like a shadow through the house. He reached for Laura's purse where it hung by the door. He'd seen the glint of it earlier, her second phone, the one she thought he didn't know about. He slipped it out, the small weight of it solid in his hand. It was locked, but he knew Laura better than she knew herself. He entered her birthday, 4 digits, and the phone opened like a vault. His breath caught. Messages, photos, a second life she'd kept hidden. He scrolled, each image a fresh betrayal. Laura and Tom in a motel room, his hand on her waist. Emma's face, photos Tom had no right to have. Rage coiled in Jake's chest like a living thing. He found the latest message, Tom's name at the top, the words of venomous whisper, "Bring Emma next time. I want to see her smile again." Jake's fingers trembled around the phone, his vision narrowing to a single, blazing point. "You sick bastard," he thought. "You're done." He copied everything, photos, texts, every scrap of filth Tom had sent. Then he put the phone back exactly as he found it. Laura would never know he'd seen it all. Not yet. He moved back to the couch, the phone in his pocket, a cold promise. Emma's soft breathing drifted down the hall, innocent, unknowing. Jake closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. He'd fought for his country, for men he'd never known. This fight was different. It was for his daughter, for the life she deserved. And he would not lose. Tomorrow, he thought, his mind ablaze. Tomorrow, Tom would learn exactly what it meant to threaten a soldier's family. The next morning dawned sharp and clear, the air outside crisp as a blade. Jake's mind was already racing as he moved through the house. Every step deliberate, every breath measured. Laura moved around the kitchen, eyes downcast, her movements stiff. She tried to act normal, pouring juice for Emma, fussing with her hair, but she couldn't meet his gaze. He let her pretend, let her think she still had a part to play. Emma sat at the table, her small hands wrapped around her favorite cup. She beamed at Jake as he walked in, her innocence alight in the gloom. "Daddy, can we go to the zoo today?" she asked, her voice bright. "Not today, princess," he said gently. "We've got something important to take care of first." Emma nodded, content. Laura's hands tightened on the counter. "Jake, where are you taking her?" she asked, her voice tight. He met her eyes, calm and steady. "Somewhere safe." Laura's mouth opened, but no words came out. He saw the fear flash across her face, but he didn't care. He turned to Emma, crouching so they were eye to eye. "Get your shoes, sweetheart. We're going on an adventure." As Emma scampered away, Laura grabbed his arm. "Jake, please," he shook her off, his voice a quiet snarl. Don't pretend you're worried about her now." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, he almost felt a flicker of pity. Almost. But then he remembered Tom's messages, the photos, the twisted obsession. And the pity turned to steel. "I'm ending this today," he said, his voice low and final. "One way or another." He gathered Emma's things, his mind already a map of everything he needed to do. Laura watched him, her eyes hollow, her shoulders slumped. She knew she'd lost any power she once held over him. As he carried Emma to the truck, the morning sun broke over the rooftops. A new day, a final chance. Jake felt the weight of it all in his chest, but he welcomed it. Because today, the war would end, and he would be the one left standing. Jake drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting protectively over Emma's car seat. She babbled about her stuffed bear and the birds outside, her innocence a shield against the dark thoughts swirling in his mind. He pulled into the lot behind an unmarked building, an old warehouse that had become Max's office. Emma looked up at the tall, gray structure with wide eyes. "Daddy, what's this place?" she asked. "It's a place where Daddy's friend helps people," he said softly, his voice calm. "We'll be safe here, Princess. You'll see." Inside, Max was waiting. The former soldier turned PI leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening as Jake stepped in, Emma clinging to his leg. "You ready?" Max asked, his gravelly voice a low rumble. Jake nodded. "I've got the phone. The proof. Everything we need to burn Tom to the ground." Max's lips twitched in a humorless smile. "Good. Because that's exactly what we're gonna do." He turned his gaze to Emma, his face softening. "Hey there, kiddo. I've got some toys in the other room. Why don't you go play while I talk to your dad?" Emma looked up at Jake, her small face trusting. He crouched and kissed her forehead. "It's okay, Princess. I'll be right here." She skipped off, the door clicking shut behind her. Jake turned back to Max, his shoulders squared. "He's been using a fake name, Max. He's been sending messages about Emma. This isn't just an affair, it's a threat." Max's eyes narrowed. "I pulled his entire record. He's a predator, no doubt." And Laura, she either didn't care, or she was too far gone to see it. Jake's jaw tightened. She's done. But Tom? I want him out of her life. Out of Emma's. For good. Max leaned forward, his voice low and deadly calm. "Then we take the fight to him. No more half measures." Jake's eyes burned with resolve. "I'm ready. Let's end this." After leaving Max's office, Jake drove Emma to his parents' house, a safe haven tucked into the edge of town, far from Laura's lies and Tom's poison. Emma clung to her stuffed bear, her small voice quivering. "Daddy, why can't we go home?" she asked, her eyes wide and wet. Jake knelt in the gravel driveway, his hands on her small shoulders. "Because home isn't safe right now, sweetheart," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But you're safe with me. I promise." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you mad at Mommy?" she whispered, her voice so small it nearly broke his heart. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool air, the scent of the pines around the house. When he opened them, his gaze was clear and calm. "I'm not mad at you, baby, and I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you." She nodded slowly, her lip trembling. He pulled her into his arms, feeling the fragile weight of her trust. "I love you more than anything," he murmured against her hair. "You're my whole world." His mother, Ellen, stepped onto the porch, her eyes soft with concern. "Bring her inside, Jake. Let her rest. You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," he admitted quietly. "Not really." Ellen laid a hand on his arm, her touch grounding. "We'll keep her safe here. You know that." "I know," he said, his voice rough. I can't take any more chances." Inside, Emma curled up on the couch, her small body wrapped in a quilt. She watched a cartoon on the old TV, but her eyes kept darting to him, seeking reassurance. He sat beside her, one arm around her tiny shoulders. Outside the window, the sky was a deep, endless blue, peaceful and indifferent. But inside, a storm still raged. And Jake knew he would do anything to make sure Emma's tears were the last she ever shed because of them. Night fell, and with it came the cold, creeping dread of what was to come. Jake returned to the house alone, the cameras he'd set up now his only eyes in the darkness. He watched the feeds from his phone, every pixel a piece of the puzzle. Laura moved through the house like a ghost, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. She spoke into her phone in low, frantic whispers. "Tom, you have to stop. He knows everything. I don't know what he'll do." Jake's lip curled in a silent snarl. He watched her cross the living room, her fingers drumming against the table. She thought she could play both sides, protect her secret, and still keep Jake in the dark. But he saw it all. He dialed Max. "She's still in touch with him," he said, his voice calm but taut with fury. "She's telling him everything." Max's voice was steady. "Then it's time to shut her down, Jake. She's a liability now, no more room for trust." Jake's eyes never left the screen. "I know, and I'm done waiting." He ended the call and watched as Laura paced, her face a pale mask of fear and guilt. Then she turned toward the camera, her eyes meeting the lens as if she could see him through it. For a moment, the weight of their shared history pressed down on him. Weddings and laughter, the soft glow of family. But that was gone now, burned away by betrayal. He leaned back, his breath steady. "You did this, Laura," he murmured to the empty room. "And now you'll live with it." The camera feed flickered, her face fading in and out of the shadows. Jake felt no pity, no hesitation, only the cold, resolute knowledge of what had to be done. Tomorrow, he would confront her once and for all. And when he did, there would be no more lies, no more shadows. Only the truth, laid bare for the world to see. Jake drove back to the house with purpose burning in his veins. Every mile felt like a countdown to the reckoning he'd been building toward. He parked in the driveway, the engine ticking softly in the cold night air. Inside, the house was dark, but he knew Laura was there, waiting, or maybe just hiding. He stepped in, the door closing behind him with a soft, final thud. Laura was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked up as he entered, her face pale in the dim light. "Jake," she began, her voice trembling. "I save it," he said, his tone like ice cracking underfoot. He crossed the room in 3 measured steps, stopping in front of her. "You think I don't know what you've done? You think I don't know every filthy detail of what you and Tom planned?" Tears welled in her eyes, but he didn't flinch. "I was scared, Jake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop it. He threatened me. Don't lie to me again," Jake snapped, his voice a low snarl. "I've seen the messages, Laura. I've seen everything." She flinched like he'd struck her, her shoulders hunching in on themselves. "Please. I didn't mean for it to get this far." Jake's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You didn't mean for him to hurt Emma? You didn't mean to let that monster near our daughter?" His voice was cold, every word a blade. Laura sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I didn't know he'd hurt her, but you knew he was dangerous," Jake cut her off, his voice calm but deadly. "And you brought him here anyway. You let him into her life." For a moment, the only sound was Laura's quiet sobs, the weight of her guilt pressing down like a stone. Jake's eyes never wavered, his resolve hard as iron. He turned away, his voice soft but final. "You're done, Laura. You're done lying. You're done pretending. Tomorrow, it all comes out. And you'll watch it happen." The next morning, Jake woke before the sun, his body wound tight with purpose. He made a strong cup of coffee, the bitter taste fueling his focus. He dressed in dark clothes, his movements quick and sure. Today was the day everything changed. He woke Emma gently, her sleepy eyes blinking up at him. "Daddy," she murmured, her voice small and sweet. "Get dressed, princess," he said softly. "We're going somewhere safe." She nodded, still half asleep, trusting him completely. As she got ready, he packed a small bag for her, her favorite books, her stuffed bear, a few clothes. He wouldn't let her see the war he was about to unleash. Laura emerged from the bedroom, her hair disheveled, her face pale. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice a trembling whisper. He met her eyes, calm and cold. "To the police," he said, "to tell them everything." She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, Jake, please don't do this. We can fix it." "There's no fixing this," he said flatly. "Emma comes first, and I'll burn every bridge to keep her safe." She stepped closer, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'll lose everything," she whispered. "You already have," he said softly. "The moment you let him in." Emma came down the stairs, her small hand clutching her bear. Jake lifted her into his arms, her weight a comforting anchor. "It's okay, baby," he murmured against her hair. "Daddy's got you." Laura reached out, her hand trembling. Jake, please. He stepped back, his expression hard. Don't, he said, his voice low and final. You don't get to ask me for anything anymore. With Emma in his arms, he walked out the door, the cold morning air filling his lungs like a promise. He would tell the police everything, every detail, every piece of evidence. And when he was done, there would be no shadows left for Tom or Laura to hide in. As he strapped Emma into her seat, she looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. Are we going to be okay, Daddy? She asked softly. He smiled, a hard edge to it. Yes, Princess, he said. We're going to be just fine. The police station was a cold, gray building that smelled faintly of stale coffee and fear. Jake sat in a small, sterile room, Emma playing quietly with her bear in the corner. He kept his eyes on her. Every word he spoke to the detective measured and deliberate. He laid out the evidence, Laura's messages, the photos, the phone logs. The detective's face darkened as he scrolled through the messages, his mouth a grim line. You're sure this is Tom Garrison? He asked, his voice low. I'm sure, Jake said, his voice calm. He's been using a fake name. He's a predator, and he's been in my home, near my daughter. The detective nodded slowly, his eyes hard. We'll take it from here, he said. We'll make sure he's never near your family again. Jake nodded, a flicker of relief in his chest. But the battle wasn't over, he knew that. He had to face Laura one last time. When he returned home, the house was silent. Laura was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as he entered, her eyes red. What did you tell them? She asked, her voice hollow. The truth, Jake said simply. Tears slid down her cheeks. So that's it. It's over. He looked at her, really looked at her, the woman he'd once trusted with everything. Yes, he said quietly. It's over. The marriage, the lies. All of it. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. But he felt nothing. No pity, no sorrow. Just a cold, resolute calm. He turned away, walking up the stairs to Emma's room. She was safe in her bed, the soft glow of her night light painting the walls in warm gold. He stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, his heart steady. The marriage was dead, but Emma was his. And he would protect her, no matter what. Even if it meant burning every last piece of the life he'd once thought he wanted. The days that followed moved like a slow-burning fuse, each one another step closer to the final reckoning. Jake spent his time at his parents' house, the safe haven that gave Emma the space to breathe and heal. She laughed with her grandparents, her smile slowly returning, her laughter ringing through the old house like music. But for Jake, there was no peace. He spent long nights poring over the evidence, every piece of paper, every message a puzzle he'd long since solved, but couldn't stop obsessing over. Tom's twisted web was clearer than ever, and Laura's part in it was undeniable. He'd filed for divorce the same day he met with the detective. Laura hadn't even tried to fight it. Her silence was an admission of guilt, her absence another fracture in the family they'd once pretended to be. He barely saw her now, just a pale, haunted figure when he went back to the house to collect Emma's things. Each trip back to the house felt like walking through the ruins of a war zone, familiar walls that now held only echoes of betrayal. The photographs on the mantel were silent witnesses, faces frozen in happier times that now felt like a distant dream. Max checked in daily, his voice a steady anchor. We're almost there, brother, he said one night, the low rumble of his voice grounding Jake. The police have everything they need. Tom's not going to slip through the cracks again. Jake nodded, his voice calm. I know, but I want to be there when they bring him in. I want to look him in the eyes and show him he never had a chance. Max was silent for a moment. You've got the heart of a warrior, Jake, and a father's fury. That's a combination that can't be beaten. Jake hung up and sat in the quiet. Outside, the night was cold and endless. But in his heart, a fire burned steady and bright. He wouldn't let that light go out until Emma was safe and Tom was nothing but a memory. The phone call came late one night, shattering the fragile calm of the house. Jake was in the living room, the soft glow of the TV washing over Emma as she drifted off to sleep on the couch. The phone buzzed in his pocket, the name on the screen twisting his gut. Laura. He stepped outside to answer it, the cold air biting at his skin. What? He snapped, his voice sharp. Laura's voice trembled on the other end. Jake. Tom called me. He's out on bail. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. What did you just say? He growled. He's out, she repeated, her voice shaking. He said if I don't help him, he'll tell everyone everything. About me. About what I did. Jake's hands curled into fists. What exactly does he think he has on you, Laura? She sobbed softly. He said he has photos. Videos. Things that make me look like I was part of it. Like I wanted it. Jake's jaw tightened, fury and disgust warring in his chest. And you're actually considering helping him? He demanded. I don't know what to do, she cried. If those videos get out, I'll lose everything. Emma, my job, my family. You already lost Emma. Jake cut her off, his voice like ice. And you're not getting her back by helping that monster. She was silent for a moment, her breathing ragged. Jake, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. He took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down. Then listen to me. You do exactly what I say. You don't talk to him again. You don't meet with him. You don't answer his calls. You let me handle it. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'm sorry, Jake. He hung up without another word, his hands shaking. He stared out at the dark yard, the icy wind biting at his face. Tom was trying to turn the tables, to use Laura's weakness as a weapon. But Jake wouldn't let that happen. He turned back to the house, his eyes hard. Emma was his world, and he'd fight Tom to the ends of the earth to keep her safe. The next day dawned bright and cold, the winter sun glinting off the frost that coated the ground. Jake woke early, every muscle taut with purpose. He left Emma with his mother, her small hands waving goodbye as he pulled away from the house. Her trust in him was the only thing that mattered now. He drove to the diner where Laura worked, parking down the street so she wouldn't see him coming. He slipped inside, the warm air and clatter of dishes a jarring contrast to the storm in his mind. Laura was behind the counter, her eyes shadowed, her smile brittle as she poured coffee for a customer. She looked up and saw him, her face going pale. She mouthed, "What are you doing here?" But he didn't answer. He waited until she was alone, then walked up to her, his voice low and steady. "Come outside," he said. She hesitated, glancing around nervously, then followed him out into the alley behind the diner. The cold bit at their faces, but Jake's anger burned hotter than any winter wind. "I know you're still talking to him," he said without preamble. Laura's eyes widened. "No, I told you, I'm not. Don't lie to me, Laura," he cut her off, his voice sharp. "I've seen the calls. I've seen the texts. You're trying to play both sides." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm scared, Jake. He said he'd hurt me if I didn't. You don't get to be scared anymore," he said, his voice cold and final. "You made your choice the moment you let him into our lives." She sagged against the wall, her shoulders slumping. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did," he said quietly. "And now it's done. You're going to cut him off completely. And if you don't, if you so much as breathe his name again, I'll make sure you never see Emma again." She looked up at him, her face pale. "I understand," she whispered. "Good," he said, turning away. "Because I'm done playing games." And so is he. As he walked back to his truck, the cold wind swirling around him, he felt something shift inside. The final pieces of his plan were falling into place. And he was ready to end this, once and for all. The air was sharp with frost as Jake drove back to his parents' house, the weight of Laura's betrayal coiling like a serpent in his chest. He gripped the wheel hard, the leather creaking under his knuckles. She was still in Tom's grasp, still feeding his lies, too blind or too weak to cut the strings he wrapped around her throat. He parked and stepped into the house, the warmth hitting him like a wave. Emma ran to him, her laughter bright, her small arms wrapping around his waist. For a moment, the darkness receded, her innocent joy a balm to the raw edges of his soul. But he knew it couldn't last. He knelt, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Go play, princess. Daddy has to make a few calls." She nodded, her trust unwavering. As she ran off, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed Max. The line crackled before his friend's gravelly voice answered. "Talk to me." "Laura's still in contact with Tom," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "He's manipulating her, using whatever he has left." "Then we need to move fast," Max said. "I've got more on Tom. His real name isn't the only lie he's told. He's been hiding assets, using fake IDs. He's planning to disappear once he gets what he wants." Jake's jaw tightened. "Not if I find him first." "You're not alone in this, brother," Max said. "I'll send everything I've got." "But Jake, be careful. He's desperate. And desperate men do stupid, dangerous things." Jake exhaled slowly, his breath turning to mist in the cold air. "So do fathers who have nothing left to lose," he said softly. He ended the call and looked out the window at the snow falling gently, each flake a whisper of calm in the storm raging around them. He wouldn't let Tom slip away. He wouldn't let Laura's weakness drag them all into the abyss. This wasn't just a battle for Emma anymore. It was a war for the soul of their family, and he wouldn't stop until it was won. That night, Jake sat alone in the living room, the quiet punctuated only by the crackle of the old radiator and the soft sighs of Emma asleep upstairs. He stared at the wall, his mind a storm of images, Laura's hollow eyes, Tom's smug grin, the messages that had burned themselves into his memory. He knew the police were close. Max had told him as much. But close wasn't enough. Tom was still out there, still lurking in the shadows. And that thought tore at Jake's chest like claws. He rose, pacing the worn carpet, his breath sharp in the cold air. He couldn't just sit and wait. Waiting was for men who still had faith in the system. But he'd seen what the system did. It hesitated. It doubted. It let monsters like Tom slip through the cracks. His mind flickered to Emma's small face, the trust in her eyes. She deserved a father who wouldn't flinch, wouldn't cower behind paperwork and procedure. She deserved a father who would face the devil himself to keep her safe. He pulled out the folder Max had sent him, the documents spread across the table like a battle plan. Tom's aliases, his last known locations, the web of lies he'd woven to stay hidden. Jake studied them all, every name, every address a waypoint on the path to the man who had tried to steal everything from him. His phone buzzed. Max again. "Got another lead," he said. "Tom's been seen at that old motel by the river. He's got a new ID, but the clerk recognized his face." Jake's pulse pounded. "I'm going there now," he said, his voice calm and deadly. "Jake," Max began, but he cut him off. "I'm not waiting anymore, Max. I'm done playing by the rules." He ended the call and grabbed his coat, the cold air biting at his skin as he stepped outside. The night was still, the snow glinting like diamonds under the moonlight. He slid behind the wheel, his hands steady on the steering wheel. "I'm coming for you, Tom," he thought, his jaw set. "And there's no place left to hide." The motel by the river loomed ahead, a flickering neon sign casting eerie shadows on the icy ground. Jake pulled in slowly, killing the headlights as he parked at the edge of the lot. He sat for a moment, the engine ticking softly, his breath misting the window. Memories of late nights in combat zones flooded back, of silent, calculated movements in the darkness, of danger lurking in every shadow. He was back in that mindset now, every sense tuned to the hunt. He slipped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the snow. The air was sharp, the cold slicing through his jacket. He moved quickly, keeping to the shadows, his eyes scanning the darkened windows of the motel. Room 12. That's what Max had said. Jake moved down the line of doors, each step deliberate, his breath slow and even. He reached the door, his heart steady. He pressed his ear to the wood, listening. A muffled voice. Tom's voice. Jake's lip curled in a silent snarl. He took a step back, his knuckles white around the handle of the old combat knife he kept in his pocket, just in case. Then he heard something else, Laura's voice. Low and shaking, but unmistakable. She was here. Rage flared in his chest, but he forced it down. He couldn't let fury cloud his focus. He needed to see, to know exactly how far she'd fallen. He slipped to the side window, peering through a crack in the grimy curtain. Tom sat on the bed, a twisted smile on his face. Laura stood across from him, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale and pinched with fear. "I'm done, Tom," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore." Tom laughed, the sound low and oily. "You think you can walk away from me now? After everything I've done for you?" Jake's grip on the knife tightened, the blade cold and familiar in his hand. He watched Laura shake her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're sick," she said, "and I'm done lying for you." Tom stood, his hand lashing out to grab her arm. "You're mine, Laura. You always have been." Jake's vision went red, but he forced himself to wait. One more moment, one more chance to end this the right way. He slipped back to the door, his heart steady. This ends tonight, he thought. One way or another. Jake's breath misted in the cold night air as he stood outside room 12, his knuckles white around the knife in his pocket. He forced himself to slow down, to think clearly, like the soldier he once was. He didn't want to burst in blind. He needed to know every angle, every threat. His phone buzzed. Mac's status, his old friend asked in a low voice. "I see them both," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laura's scared. She wants out. Tom isn't letting her." "Stay sharp," Max warned. "I'll be there in 10. Don't do anything until I'm there." Jake's eyes narrowed, watching through the cracked curtain. Tom was pacing now, gesturing wildly, his voice low and venomous. Laura flinched back, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "You said you were with me." Tom snapped. "You said you'd help me. Don't act like you're some innocent now." Laura's voice cracked. "I was wrong, Tom. I was wrong to believe you. Jake was right. You're poison." Tom laughed, a sound that curdled Jake's blood. "You're a liar, Laura. And liars don't get second chances." Laura's shoulders slumped. "Then do what you have to do," she whispered. "But I'm done." Jake felt his pulse quicken. He could see the fear in her eyes. Real fear this time, not the fake tears she'd tried to sell him before. Whatever else Laura had done, she was trapped now, and Tom had her cornered. He stepped back from the window, breathing hard. 10 minutes. He could wait 10 minutes for Max. But every second felt like an hour, the tension coiling tighter with each breath. Inside, Tom's laughter echoed again, low and taunting. Laura's shoulders shook, but she stood her ground. "Stay strong," Jake thought, his fingers drumming against the doorframe. "Just a few more minutes. Then this ends." Jake shifted his weight, every muscle tight with anticipation. He could see the glint of fear in Laura's eyes as Tom closed the distance between them, his voice a venomous hiss. "You think you can just walk away?" Tom snarled, his hand gripping her wrist with cruel force. "I own you, Laura. I own everything about you." She tried to pull away, her voice a shaky whisper. "Please, Tom, don't do this. I'll tell them everything. I swear. I'm done lying." His smile twisted, his fingers digging deeper into her skin. "You think they'll believe you? You're nothing, Laura. You're just a weak little girl playing dress-up in someone else's life." Jake's fists clenched. He took a half step forward, ready to kick the door in. But then he forced himself to stop, to breathe. Max was close. He just had to hold on. Laura's voice cracked. "I'm not yours anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was stupid, but I'm done. You can't hurt me anymore." Tom's laughter was cold and hollow. "You think that matters? I'll make you watch everything you've built burn to the ground." Jake's phone buzzed again. "Max, I'm here," he said, his voice steady. "Ready when you are." Jake took one last look through the window. Laura's face was pale, but her shoulders were squared. Tom's shadow loomed over her, but she didn't back down. He clicked off the phone and gripped the door handle, his jaw set. "It ends tonight," he murmured. The weight of everything pressed down on him, the lies, the betrayal, the love that had once been the foundation of his world. But none of it mattered now. Only Emma's safety, only the truth. He met Max's eyes through the window, both men nodding in silent understanding. And then, with a final breath, he kicked the door in. The door slammed open with a crack that split the night, the wooden frame splintering under Jake's boot. The sudden violence of it echoed through the cramped room, freezing Tom in place. His eyes widened, his lips curling in a snarl. "Jake!" Laura gasped, her eyes darting between him and Tom. Relief and fear mingled on her face. Jake stepped into the room, Max at his side, the air electric with tension. The small, shabby motel room felt like a cage, the walls too close, the silence too loud. Tom let go of Laura's arm, his face twisting with contempt. "You just can't let it go, can you?" He sneered, his voice dripping venom. "You think you can save her? Save your precious little family?" Jake's jaw tightened. "This isn't about her anymore," he said evenly. "This is about Emma. And you're not going to hurt her ever again." Tom laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You're a fool, Jake. You always were. You think you're the hero in this story? You're just another piece on the board." Jake took another step forward, his voice low and cold. "No more games. No more lies. This ends tonight." Laura edged back, her shoulders pressed against the peeling wallpaper. "Jake, please, don't do this," she whispered. He shot her a look, his eyes hard. "I'm not doing this for you, Laura. I'm doing this for Emma." Tom's eyes glittered with malice. "You're making a mistake," he said softly. "You don't know what I have. You don't know what I'm capable of." Jake met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't care," he said simply, "because there's nothing you can take from me that I'm not willing to lose." For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Tom lunged. The room exploded in motion, Tom lunging forward with a wild snarl, his hands clawing for Jake's throat. But Jake was ready. Years of combat training snapped into place, his body moving with lethal precision. He sidestepped the first swing, his fist slamming into Tom's ribs with a sickening crack. Tom grunted, doubling over, but he wasn't done. He swung again, catching Jake's jaw with a glancing blow. Pain flared, but Jake didn't flinch. He grabbed Tom by the collar and drove him back against the wall, the plaster cracking under the force. "You're done," he growled, his breath hot in Tom's face. "You're not hurting anyone ever again." Tom spat blood, his eyes wild. "You think you can stop me? You think you can save her?" Jake didn't answer. He slammed Tom's head against the wall, once, twice, enough to daze him, but not enough to kill. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to end it. Max moved in, grabbing Tom's arms and twisting them behind his back, the zip ties biting into his wrists. "It's over, scumbag," Max said coldly. "The police are on their way." Tom slumped, the fight draining from his body. Laura sank to the floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Jake turned to her, his voice flat. "This is what you chose," he said, his tone hollow. "You let him in. You let him near Emma." She buried her face in her hands, her tears soaking into her palms. "I'm sorry," she whispered, over and over like a prayer. Jake didn't answer. He looked at Tom, at the man who tried to tear his family apart. And in that moment, he felt no pity, no remorse. He turned to Max, his voice steady. "Let's get him out of here." The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The final battle was over. And Jake knew, as he stepped outside into the cold night air, that he'd done what he had to do. For Emma. For himself. For the promise he'd made to protect what was his. The sirens faded into the distance as the police took Tom away, his head down, the handcuffs biting into his wrists. The cold air stung Jake's cheeks as he watched, his breath steady, the weight of the night settling into his bones. Laura sat slumped on the motel bed, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked up at Jake with red-rimmed eyes. "Is it really over?" she whispered, her voice fragile. Jake didn't answer. He didn't have the words, not for her. He turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting down in the pale light. He called his mother as he walked to his truck, his voice low and calm. "I'm coming home," he said. "Tell Emma I'm coming." The drive back felt like 1,000 miles. His mind churned with everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayals, the danger he'd fought to keep away from his daughter. He gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw set. When he finally pulled into his parents' driveway, Emma was waiting in the window, her small face pressed to the glass. She ran out into the cold as he stepped from the truck, her arms flung wide. "Daddy," she cried, her voice bright and clear in the night air. He knelt, scooping her up into his arms, her small body warm and solid against him. "I'm here, Princess," he murmured, his voice thick. I'm here. You're safe. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her own wide and solemn. Promise? She whispered. He nodded, pressing his forehead to hers. I promise, baby girl. Always. Inside, the house was warm and bright, the smell of cocoa and fresh bread filling the air. His mother gave him a quiet smile, her eyes gentle as she watched him hold Emma close. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt the tension ease from his shoulders. He had fought his war and won. Now, all that mattered was this small, perfect moment with the only person who truly mattered. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the winter sun turning the frost on the ground into a glittering tapestry. Jake sat at the kitchen table, Emma in his lap, her small fingers tracing the lines of his knuckles. His parents moved quietly around them, the scent of fresh coffee and toast filling the air. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They'd seen the storm in his eyes when he came home, and they knew he'd done what he had to do. Emma looked up at him, her eyes wide and trusting. Are you okay, Daddy? She asked softly. He brushed a curl from her forehead, his lips curving into a small, tired smile. I am now, he said. Because you're okay. She smiled, a little shy and sweet, and leaned her head against his chest. He closed his eyes, holding her close, her warmth chasing away the last chill of the night before. But even as he held her, his mind turned to the future. Laura was still out there broken, but free. He knew she'd lost any hold she had on him, but he couldn't shake the thought of what she'd been willing to risk, what she'd been willing to sacrifice. He'd called the lawyer that morning, setting the final pieces in motion. The divorce would be swift and final, no room for Laura's pleas or tears. He would have full custody of Emma. She would never be used as a pawn again. The phone rang, cutting through the quiet. Jake answered, his voice steady. Yeah. Max's voice came through, low and firm. It's done, brother. Tom's going away for a long time. The DA has everything, your evidence sealed it. Jake exhaled slowly, relief and exhaustion washing through him. Thank you, Max. You did the hard part, Max said. Take care of your girl. She's the only thing that matters now. Jake nodded, even though Max couldn't see it. I will. He set the phone down, his hand resting on Emma's back. The world outside was still a mess of shadows and lies. But in this kitchen, in this moment, he had everything he needed. 2 days later, Jake found himself back at the house he'd once called home. The living room felt like a hollow shell, the warmth of family long since stripped away. He walked through it with quiet purpose, each step echoing in the emptiness. Laura was there, waiting. She stood by the fireplace, her eyes downcast, her hands twisting nervously. She looked up as he entered, her lips parting. Jake, save it, he said quietly. I didn't come here to talk about the past. I came to end it. She flinched, her shoulders curling inward. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. He met her eyes, calm and cold. Sorry doesn't change what you did, he said. It doesn't change what you let him do. Tears welled in her eyes, but he didn't move. He wouldn't give her that comfort. I've filed the papers, he said evenly. You'll sign them. No arguments. No negotiations. She nodded, her tears spilling down her cheeks. I understand. I'm taking Emma, he continued, his voice firm. You'll have supervised visits, if the court allows it. But she's mine. And you're not going to use her to make yourself feel better ever again. Laura swallowed hard, her voice a whisper. I know. I won't fight you. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and final. Then he turned away, his mind already closing the door on her for good. He paused at the threshold, his voice quiet but resolute. You made your choice, Laura, and I made mine. He stepped outside, the cold air biting at his skin. Behind him, the door clicked shut, and with it, the last chapter of that life, closed forever. Back at his parents' house, Jake sat at the kitchen table, the laptop open in front of him. He played the recording again, the video of Laura's last conversation with Tom in that grimy motel room. In the video, Laura's voice shook. I can't do this anymore, Tom. I won't. Tom's voice was cold, mocking. You think you can just walk away? You're mine, Laura. You always have been. Jake watched her flinch, her shoulders trembling. He paused the video, his breath steady. He'd shown it to the police, to the lawyer, to everyone who needed to see the truth. It was the final nail in Tom's coffin and Laura's too. He closed the laptop and leaned back, his eyes closing. The weight of it all pressed down on him, the betrayal, the lies, the fear. But underneath it, there was something else, a quiet relief. The truth was out. There was no going back. Emma came running into the room, her laughter bright. She climbed into his lap, her small hands wrapping around his neck. "Daddy, come play," she squealed. He smiled, the first real smile in weeks, and pressed a kiss to her cheek. "In a minute, Princess," he said softly. "Daddy's just taking care of something." She beamed, her eyes bright with trust. And in that moment, he knew he'd done it. He'd fought for her, for the life she deserved. And he'd won. The past was ashes. The future was waiting. And Jake was ready to meet it head-on. The morning after he closed the last chapter of that part of his life, Jake found himself driving out to the courthouse. The winter air was crisp, the sky a hard, cold blue that matched the steel in his veins. He'd already sent the video of Laura's final conversation with Tom to the DA. Now, he needed to be there when they brought Tom to face the music. No more shadows. No more half-truths. Only justice. He walked into the courthouse, his boots echoing on the cold marble floor. Max was waiting for him, his broad shoulders hunched against the chill. He nodded as Jake approached. "You sure you're ready for this?" Jake's jaw tightened. "I'm sure." Inside, Tom sat at the defense table, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt. But his eyes, those cold, dead eyes, still held that same arrogant gleam. Jake took a seat in the back, his heart steady. Tom turned his head and met his gaze, a slow, mocking smile curving his lips. Jake stared back, unblinking. He saw Tom for what he truly was, a parasite who thrived on weakness. And he had no more hold here. The DA stood, presenting the evidence, the videos, the text messages, the testimony of Laura herself. Every word was a nail in Tom's coffin, every fact a weight that would drag him down for good. Jake listened in silence, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on his knee. Each detail laid bare was another crack in the mask Tom had worn so easily. Laura's voice, trembling and broken, echoed through the courtroom speakers. "You're poison. You're done." Tom's smirk faded as the evidence mounted, his confidence draining away like water through a sieve. And for the first time, Jake saw something in his eyes he hadn't seen before: fear. Jake leaned back in his chair, his breath slow and even. "This is what you brought on yourself," he thought. "This is the face of a man who thought he'd never be caught. And now you're nothing." After the hearing, Jake walked out into the cold, the courthouse doors slamming shut behind him. The air was biting, but he welcomed it. It felt clean, honest, a sharp contrast to the stifling lies he'd been fighting for so long. He paused at the bottom of the steps, his breath a white cloud. Laura was there, waiting. She looked small in her heavy coat, her hair pulled back, her face pale and drawn. "Jake," she said softly, her voice raw. "Can we talk?" He didn't answer, just stood there, his eyes on hers. She took a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping. "I know I've lost everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." He tilted his head, his face calm, unreadable. "You're right," he said quietly. "You don't." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but he didn't flinch. She reached for him, her hand trembling. "Please, just let me say this. I'm sorry, Jake. I was blind. I was weak. I thought I could fix it, but all I did was make it worse." He watched her in silence, her words like wind blowing across a dead field. "Emma's all that matters now," he said finally. "She's my priority. My only priority." Laura nodded, her tears falling faster. "I know. I'll do whatever the court decides. I won't fight you. I want her to know I love her. That I'm sorry." His expression softened a fraction, but he said nothing. Words didn't mean much to him anymore. Actions did. And Laura's actions had spoken volumes. She dropped her hand, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I'll leave you alone, Jake. I promise. He nodded once, then turned away. The cold wind cut across his face, but he welcomed it. Laura's collapse wasn't his concern anymore. His focus was on the small girl waiting at home, her laughter still the one thing that made sense in a world gone dark. Later that evening, Jake sat in the old armchair in his parents' living room, the glow of the fireplace painting the walls in warm light. Emma played on the floor with her dolls, her small voice a soft melody that filled the room. Max arrived quietly, his broad frame filling the doorway. He held 2 cups of coffee in his hands, setting one on the table next to Jake. "Thought you could use this," he said, his voice low. Jake took it, nodding his thanks. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet crackle of the fire and Emma's laughter. Max cleared his throat. "I should have seen it sooner," he said finally. "I should have known something was off with Tom. I was too focused on the small details, not the bigger picture." Jake glanced over, his expression calm. "You did what you could, Max. You helped me find the truth. That's what matters." Max shifted, his eyes heavy with regret. "I was supposed to have your back, brother. And I did, but I should have been faster. Smarter. I let you walk into that fight alone." Jake shook his head. "You didn't let me do anything. I chose this path, Max. And you stood with me when it counted. That's what counts." Max met his gaze, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "You're a good man, Jake. A good father. Don't let anyone, especially Laura, ever make you doubt that." "I won't," Jake said softly. "Not anymore." Max nodded and stood, clapping him on the shoulder. "If you need anything at all, you know where to find me." Jake watched his friend go, the old wood floor creaking under his boots. He took a sip of the coffee, the warmth of it grounding him. He looked down at Emma, her bright eyes meeting his. "Daddy?" she asked. "Are you okay now?" He smiled, a small, real smile. "Yeah, princess. I'm okay." The following week, Jake stood in the family court, the air tense with the weight of final decisions. Laura sat across from him, her eyes downcast, her shoulders slumped. She looked like a ghost of the woman he once knew, her face pale and drawn. The judge read through the final paperwork, his voice calm and deliberate. "This court finds in favor of Mr. Jake Miller," he said, each word a steady hammer. "Full custody is granted to Mr. Miller. Supervised visitation will be scheduled at the discretion of the court." Laura let out a soft, shuddering breath, her head bowing lower. Tears glistened on her cheeks, but she said nothing. The fight was over. Jake felt the weight of those words settle in his chest like a warm stone. He reached over, squeezing Emma's small hand, her wide eyes looking up at him with a trust that took his breath away. "It's going to be okay, princess," he whispered, his voice thick with relief. "I promise." The judge signed the last page, the finality of it ringing clear. Jake stood, gathering Emma into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her laughter soft against his ear. It was a sound he'd fight to protect every day for the rest of his life. He walked out of the courtroom, his shoulders back, his steps sure. The war was over. The future was theirs. And for the first time in a long, long time, he believed in it. The winter sun rose over the small town, casting a golden light on the snow-covered streets. Jake stood at the window of his childhood bedroom, the weight of the past weeks finally easing from his shoulders. Emma slept soundly in the twin bed beside his, her small body curled under the quilt his mother had made. He watched her for a long time, the soft rise and fall of her chest a quiet reassurance. The world outside was cold, but in this room there was warmth. Safety. Downstairs, the smell of fresh bread drifted up from the kitchen. He could hear his mother humming softly, her voice a low melody that wrapped around the old house like a blessing. Jake moved quietly, careful not to wake Emma. He padded down the stairs, the wood creaking under his weight. His father sat at the kitchen table, the newspaper spread out before him, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Morning," Jake said softly. His father looked up, his eyes warm. "Morning, son. Sleep at all?" "A little," Jake admitted. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. She's safe. That's all that matters. His father nodded, his expression grave. You did what you had to do, Jake. You fought for her. Don't ever doubt that. I don't, Jake said, his voice steady. Not anymore. They sat in silence for a moment, the quiet of the morning wrapping around them like a cocoon. Outside, the sun rose higher, the promise of a new day gleaming on the horizon. Jake took a long sip of his coffee, feeling the heat spread through his chest. For the first time in weeks, he let himself believe that things could be good again, that he could be enough for Emma and for himself. Later that day, Jake drove Emma to the small house he'd rented on the edge of town. It was modest, with peeling paint and an overgrown garden, but it was theirs, a place to start fresh. Emma sat in the back seat, her eyes wide as they pulled into the driveway. Is this our new house, Daddy? She asked, her voice a mix of wonder and curiosity. He turned to her, his smile small but real. Yeah, Princess. This is home now. They stepped out of the car, the snow crunching under their boots. Jake unlocked the door and pushed it open, the scent of old wood and fresh paint greeting them. Emma ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. He followed her, his heart light. She touched everything, walls, windows, the worn banister of the staircase, as if to claim it all as her own. In the small living room, she turned to him, her eyes bright. Can we make it pretty, Daddy? Like Grandma's house. He knelt, brushing a curl from her cheek. We can make it whatever you want, Princess, he said softly. This is our new beginning. She grinned, her small teeth flashing. Can we paint my room pink? Anything you want, he said, his smile widening. Anything. The words felt like a promise, one he would spend the rest of his life keeping. They spent the afternoon exploring every corner of the house, their laughter filling the empty spaces. Jake watched Emma twirl in the small bedroom she'd claimed, her joy a balm to every scar he carried. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was hope, a place where the past couldn't touch them, a place where they could build something real and lasting. And as he watched Emma's face light up with dreams of what could be, Jake knew this was exactly where they were meant to be. That evening, Jake tucked Emma into her new bed, the room still bare but bright with the promise of what it would become. She clutched her stuffed bear to her chest, her eyes wide in the glow of the small nightlight. Daddy, she whispered, her voice small and hopeful. Are the bad people all gone now? Jake sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers brushing her hair back from her forehead. They're gone, baby, he said quietly. They can't hurt us anymore. Her lips curved into a small, sleepy smile. You promise? He pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice steady and sure. I promise. She nodded, her eyelids drooping. Okay, she murmured, her voice trailing off as sleep claimed her. He watched her for a long moment, the slow rise and fall of her breath a comfort he'd fought hard to win. Then he rose, moving to the small window that looked out over the dark street. The night was still and cold, the moon casting a pale glow over the snow. He could feel the weight of everything that had come before, every lie, every betrayal, every fight. But in this quiet room, it all felt far away. He turned back to Emma, his heart swelling. She was safe. That was all that mattered. He closed the door softly behind him, the small click of final punctuation mark on the nightmare they'd left behind. Downstairs, he sat in the living room, the old couch creaking under his weight. The house was quiet, but he didn't feel alone. He'd won. For Emma. For himself. And in the silence, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd find a way to heal, too. The next morning, Jake woke early, the pale winter light seeping through the curtains. He lay still for a moment, listening to the gentle rhythm of Emma's breathing in the next room. It was a sound he'd come to cherish, a quiet promise of safety, of a future that belonged to them alone. He rose and dressed quietly, pulling on a worn sweater that smelled faintly of soap and pine. In the kitchen, he brewed a pot of coffee, the rich scent filling the small space. The house was still bare, but he didn't mind. They'd fill it together. Emma patted in, her hair a tousled halo around her sleepy face. Morning, Daddy, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Princess, he said softly, lifting her into his arms. She wrapped her small arms around his neck, her cheek resting against his shoulder. Are we going to stay here forever? She asked, her voice small and hopeful. He kissed her hair, his voice gentle. Forever, baby, he said. This is home now. She smiled, her eyes bright, and snuggled closer. He held her there, feeling the warmth of her small body, the quiet certainty in her trust. Outside, the world moved on. Cars hummed by. The wind whispered through the bare trees. But in that kitchen, time slowed to a heartbeat, the moment stretching out like the first breath of spring. Jake closed his eyes, letting himself sink into it. For the first time in so long, he wasn't a soldier fighting a war. He wasn't a husband betrayed or a man lost in the dark. He was just a father, a protector. And in that simple truth, he found a flicker of peace. The days that followed were a gentle rhythm, the house slowly filling with the sounds of a life Emma and Jake were building together. He painted her room a bright, cheerful pink, the color of bubblegum and spring flowers. She squealed with delight, her tiny hands pressing into the wet paint, leaving prints like small promises across the wall. He laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that startled him with its warmth. She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. It's ours, Daddy, she said, her voice so full of certainty it made his chest ache. Our home. He knelt, his hands covered in streaks of pink, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Yeah, Princess. It's all ours. At night, he lay awake in the small room down the hall from hers, listening to her soft breathing. Each breath was an anchor, a tether to the world he'd fought so hard to carve out of the darkness. Outside, the wind howled against the eaves, but the house stood firm, quiet, and warm. One evening, as snow fell thick and silent outside, there was a knock at the door. Jake opened it to find Laura standing there, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. She looked small and lost, a shadow of the woman she used to be. I'm not here to fight, she said quietly. I needed to see her, to say goodbye. Jake's jaw tightened. He stepped aside, his gaze wary. 10 minutes, he said flatly. That's all. Laura stepped inside, her hands trembling. Emma ran to her, her small arms wrapping around her mother's waist. Mommy, she cried, her voice full of innocent joy. Laura knelt, her face crumpling as she buried her nose in Emma's hair. I love you, baby, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Jake watched from the doorway, his arms crossed. He saw the love there, the regret, but he also saw the finality of it. This was the end of Laura's chapter in their lives. When Laura finally pulled away, her tears fell freely. She looked at Jake, her voice breaking. Thank you for giving her what I couldn't. He nodded once, his voice quiet. Goodbye, Laura. And with that, she slipped out into the night, leaving the past behind her. The following morning, Jake rose before the sun, the sky still a deep velvet blue streaked with the faintest hint of dawn. He padded down the hallway, pausing at Emma's door. She slept curled up in her blanket, her small face relaxed and untroubled. He stepped outside, the cold air biting at his skin. The world was hushed, the snow crunching under his boots as he walked into the yard. The old oak tree in the corner was cloaked in white, its bare branches reaching for the pale light. Jake stood there, his breath misting in the cold. He closed his eyes, feeling the silence settle around him like a blessing. The fight was done. The ghosts of betrayal, of guilt, and shame, they were still there, but they didn't own him anymore. The door creaked behind him. Emma peeked out, her small face glowing in the half-light. Daddy, she called, her voice soft and sweet. He turned, his lips curving into a smile. Come here, Princess, he said, holding out his arms. She ran to him, her laughter like bells in the crisp air. He lifted her, her weight a comforting warmth against the chill. Together, they watched the first rays of sun break over the horizon, painting the snow in gold and rose. It's pretty, she murmured, her head resting on his shoulder. It is, he said, his voice low. The start of something new. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright. Are we happy now, Daddy? He pressed a kiss to her hair, his heart full. Yeah, baby, he whispered. We're happy. We're safe. And we're together. That's all that matters. The wind rustled around them, soft and cold, but he didn't feel it. In that moment, there was only Emma's warmth in his arms and the light of a new day breaking over the world. The sun rose high that day, its rays turning the snow outside into rivers of gold. Jake sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee warming his hands as he watched Emma dance through the room, her laughter as bright as the light spilling through the windows. The house felt different now, alive, brimming with the warmth of a new beginning. The walls were still bare, the floors still worn, but it didn't matter. In every corner, he saw the promise of what they'd build together. A place for memories, for laughter, for healing. Emma paused at the doorway, her hair a halo of sunlight. "Daddy," she said, her eyes wide with wonder, "can we have a garden here? With flowers and bees and maybe a little pond?" He smiled, the weight in his chest loosening with every word. "We can have anything you want, princess," he said softly. "This is your home too." She squealed with delight, clapping her hands. "I want lots of flowers. And a big tree to climb." Jake laughed, the sound warm and real. "We'll plant them together, okay? This spring, when the ground thaws, we'll start." Her smile was all the answer he needed. Later that day, he took her hand and walked through each room, imagining what they would become. A kitchen filled with the smells of bread and coffee, a living room echoing with laughter, a yard alive with color and light. It was more than he'd dared hope for. Emma squeezed his hand. "We're okay now, right, Daddy?" He knelt, brushing a curl from her forehead. "We're better than okay, princess. We're exactly where we're meant to be." And for the first time, he believed it. The past was a shadow, but here, in this house, with Emma, there was only light. Spring came early that year, the snow melting into rivers that whispered of green things to come. Jake and Emma stood in the yard, the sun warm on their faces as they planted the first seeds in the dark earth. Emma knelt, her small hands carefully pressing a tiny flower bulb into the soil. "This one will be pink," she said with quiet certainty. "Like my room." Jake watched her, his heart swelling. "It'll be beautiful, princess," he said. "Just like you." She grinned, her teeth flashing white. "And the bees will come. And butterflies, too." He nodded, feeling the old weight in his chest break apart like ice in the sun. "They will," he said. "This is your garden now, Emma. Yours to watch grow." They worked in quiet companionship, the dirt cool and sweet-smelling under their fingers. The world outside was still messy, still broken in places. But here, in this small patch of earth, there was only promise. When they were done, Emma leaned back on her heels, her eyes bright. "Are we happy, Daddy?" she asked softly, her voice so full of hope it made him ache. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're more than happy, princess," he said, his voice steady and sure. "We're free." She beamed, her small arms wrapping around his neck. And in that moment, as the wind whispered through the branches and the sun painted the world in gold, Jake knew it was true. They'd come through the fire and found something worth everything. Now, I have a question for you, dear reader. If you were Jake, what would you have done differently? Or would you have fought for Emma the same way? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear how you'd stand for your family. And hey, if you felt the power of this story, don't just read and leave. Smash that like button, hit subscribe to join me for more powerful tales, and share this story so we can keep telling stories that matter. Let's keep this family growing. So, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story too.